Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Fireside Chat for October 11, 2018. I'm Mayor Rich Hill from the Village of Round Lake Beach. Tonight we have Metra with us tonight. We have the board chairman, Norm Carlson, and the executive director, CEO, Jim Derwinski. A little bit about Norm. Norm was appointed to the Metra Board of Directors in April 2013 by the chairman of the Lake County Board and was elected chairman of the board in October 2016. Mr. Carlson spent 34 years with Arthur Anderson Company, being appointed as a North American rail industry head in 1985 and a worldwide managing partner of the transportation practice in 1990. He served in that capacity until exercising his early retirement option in 2000. In 2000, he formed Carlson Consulting International, serving as short-term executive in challenging situations, including being non-executive chairman of the Board of Railworks during a successful bankruptcy. Mr. Carlson is a graduate of the University of Illinois with a BS of Accountancy degree and is a certified public accountant. He served in the U.S. Army Infantry Officer in Vietnam and was awarded the Bronze Star for meritorious service. Welcome, Norm. We also have James Derwinski. He's the CEO Executive Director. He was appointed the CEO Executive Director by the Metra Board of Directors in 2017. He began his railroad career as a locomotive electrician with the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad, which later became part of the Union Pacific Railroad, and joined Metra as an electrician in 1997 and rose to the ranks in the mechanical department, serving in progressively responsible senior leadership positions, including as Metra's chief mechanical officer. In that role, he oversaw 650 employees, responsible for the repair, inspection, cleaning, and maintenance of the railroad's 1,164 pieces of rolling stock used in commuter service. The department is also responsible for Metra's fleet of trucks and automobiles. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me tonight. We appreciate it greatly. And I believe you wanted to start out with a video, a little bit about Metra, unless you want to say anything else before we do that.
This video is actually put out by the RTA, so it's the entire region, the entire transit system. So it's kind of something we've been highlighting recently, and I think it leads into this conversation very well.
Terrific. Well, we'll go to the video then.
Every day, 2 million people count on us to get to school, to work, to where they need to go, and back home again.
Transit's the way to go. You don't have to sit in traffic.
Fast, convenient.
Without the bus, I'd be stuck.
Our region is built on mass transit. The CTA, Metra, and PACE were created more than 70 years ago to replace private rail, streetcar, and bus companies that went bankrupt. Private investors were replaced by government investors. And despite inheriting aging equipment, inaccessible stations, worn track, and old trains, they helped the region grow into a premier hub for freight, banking, and commerce. Today, our regional transit system is the second largest in the nation. We serve Chicago and 277 municipalities in 6 northeastern Illinois counties.
Yeah, I take the train every day to work.
It's just relaxing. It just makes things easier, really.
Public transit benefits all of us. It enhances lives by letting riders talk, text, read, work, or just zone out while someone else does the driving. It attracts businesses, jobs, and increases property values. Did you know that in Chicago, properties within 2 blocks of transit are more than twice as valuable as those further away? And public transit saves money, even if you don't ride. An average of $400 a year for rush hour drivers because it reduces the number of cars on the road. But now, it's all at risk. Our systems are large and very old. 31% of our buses and trains are beyond their useful life. Safe to ride, but costly to maintain, and aging faster than we can replace them.
Doesn't the government pay for all that?
In theory, however, the state hasn't passed an infrastructure bill in a decade. For years, funding has been wholly insufficient to operate and maintain your transit system. There's too little local support, state dollars are rapidly diminishing, and federal funding hasn't grown significantly for years. It's time to act. It's time to invest in transit. Investing in transit means making your rides even better. With projects like an overhaul of hundreds of CTA rail cars and building a new maintenance shop to replace the one that's been in use since the 1890s. Projects like the replacement and repair of 61 Metra bridges, some made of timber that are still in use. Projects like the purchase of 412 new PACE buses to replace aging ones that have reached the end of their useful life.
Now that's getting our money's worth.
We have big goals. to deliver value on our investment, to build on the strength of our network, and to stay competitive. That's why transit needs new sources of funding.
I thought fares pay for transit.
They just raised the fare, so I don't know where it's going.
Actually, fares only cover about half of each ride. The system was designed as a public-private partnership. The plan was, because it benefits everyone, riders and taxpayers would share the cost. So each ride is funded by sales tax, the state, and a little from local governments. Problem is, those sources are not very reliable. Recent state funding cuts are one of the reasons why we've seen fare increases and service cutbacks. We need funding we can count on to keep providing the rides you depend on. With funding, we can design and build projects efficiently. Without it, projects are stalled, prices rise, and we may never leave the station. With funding, we can deliver fast and reliable service. Without it, we risk breakdowns, slowdowns, and service disruptions.
Doors closing.
And with funding, transit stays competitive, something that's getting a lot more difficult as riders today have more and more choices. Because we need transit. It's the backbone of the Chicago region's transportation network. It's the most affordable, equitable, and dependable way to ride. It's why investing in transit must be a priority.
Well, it's a priority for me. I have to get to work.
For my life, it's a priority. Transit is a priority, yeah.
I'd pay more if I didn't have to be packed in like this.
So would I.
With new funding, we can continue to do what we do best. Save you time and money, getting you where you need to go. It means planning your ride will be even easier with real-time travel information, mobile payment apps, and enhanced trip planning information. We can keep ridership growing.
That's awesome.
That works for me.
So how much are we talking?
We need a stable, dependable, dedicated annual capital investment program of $2 to $3 billion per year over the next 10 years to protect and preserve the transit system you depend on.
And how much are we investing now? Not even half. Not even half, wow.
A new capital investment plan for the Chicago region is overdue.
I don't see how we can afford not to do it.
It's time. Time to act. Time to invest in transit. Because transit makes life better for all of us.
That was very good. Yeah, it kind of gave a good opening. And one thing that we probably should really mention is transit involves three key parts. You have the CTA, the Chicago Transit Authority. We also have PACE, which we had Minnesota and Tim Dilsaver here a few months ago talk about PACE, and they brought out to our National Night Out one of the brand new buses that they put online, which is great to see, the improvements there. And then there's also Metra, which is the rail aspect of the whole transportation piece. I guess if we could begin, maybe tell us a little bit more about Metra and what is the governing structure of Metra. How do you run your day-to-day operations?
Well, the governing structure of Metra is a board of directors of 11 people. Each of the so-called collar counties has one representative on the board, and I happen to be the Lake County representative, as you pointed out, Rich. The four quadrants of suburban Cook County have a representative, so there's four representatives there. Mm-hmm. They are picked by a group of commissioners in each of the quadrants. Then the president of Cook County has an appointment, and this person happens to represent all of the suburban areas of Cook County.
Wow.
And then the mayor of Chicago has one appointment. So that is the 11 people that put together. A little bit about Metra. We cover the 6-county RTA region, just like PACE does. Obviously, we are looked upon as a suburban railroad, but would you believe that 79 of our 242 stations are in Chicago? So we do have quite a Chicago constituency, and probably the largest single group of riders are suburban Cook County. The service territory is 37,000 square miles, which is equal to the combination of the states of Rhode Island and Delaware.
Wow.
Every rush hour, we move a body of people that is equal to the population of Naperville, which is the 4th largest city in the state. We operate in the most complex rail terminal in the United States. There are 1,300 to 1,400 trains in the Chicago terminal every weekday. And what I explain to people is one of the easiest things we do is run trains because we have the size of a community. Every day we have medical emergencies, police activities, vehicles on the tracks, vehicle collisions, impacts of weather, you name it, all the same problems that you experience here in Round Lake Beach. So that is a little bit of the overstructure, but let's talk about some of the details. We run 737 trains a day. Think about that number. There are 56 Amtrak trains in Chicago. We host 18 of those trains on tracks owned by Metra. We also host 39 South Shore trains coming in from Michigan City, Gary, South Bend. What most people don't understand is we're also a freight railroad. We host up to 60 freight trains a day on our railroad. Many of those are coming through the Milwaukee North line from Roundout. In the case here, these trains are operated by Canadian National on their railroad. Our passenger trains operate at speeds up to 79 miles an hour. The freight trains operate up to speeds of 60 miles an hour. If you can believe this, 25% of all U.S. rail traffic comes through the Chicago region. And those double-stack trains you see with the containers piled up, 46% of all intermodal units moving in the United States touch Chicago. So these are just some of the things that goes on. In 2017, we had 78.6 million passengers. That's down, unfortunately. Part of that, unfortunately, is fares. We are well aware of that. We have 487 route miles. I mentioned the 242 stations, 571 grade crossings, and 847 bridges, of which 400 are 100 years old or older. The bridges that we are replacing on the UP North Line in Ravenswood were installed in 1896 and 1897, to give you some measure. We have 149 locomotives, 845 diesel-hauled rail coaches, 186 electric rail cars on Metra Electric, and 9,800 parking spaces, 90,800 parking spaces. Most people have no idea the operation is that large. And the complexity we have of running these trains when you're interfacing with 500 freight trains. So I think that's the first probably, oh my gosh, that you've are going to experience as we talk a little bit more about Metra.
Well, two things. You mentioned that Naperville is the 4th largest. Round the Beach is the 75th largest, just so you can remember that for next time.
I will do.
And also, I didn't realize that Metra actually owned track. I thought it was all belonged to the freight rails. And is it in the city of Chicago that you own the rails itself?
Well, the reason that we own track is our heritage, and the video made reference to bankrupt properties. The CTA was created in 1947 to take over the bankruptcy of the Chicago Transit Authority, or the Chicago Rapid Transit Company, and the Chicago Surface Lines, which was the street railways. If most people are shocked to know that the Chicago Rapid Transit Company was a subsidiary of Commonwealth Edison, because starting around 1911, they weren't paying the electric bill. So they basically took it over. So basically, the Rapid Transit Company was in bankruptcy more often than it wasn't, and the same was with the streetcars. The formation of the surface lines in 1913 was also an attempt to get some of the properties out of bankruptcy, and they managed to put the rest of the system into bankruptcy. So we go through the 50s and 60s, which were not good times for the railroads, and Metra was actually created in 1984 to take over direct operation of the Rock Island Railroad, which shut down on March 31st, 1980. Then, so we own the Rock Island line down to Joliet. The Milwaukee Road, which is the line to Fox Lake, as well as the line to Elgin, went into bankruptcy around 1980 and was carved up into, reduced in size. The last piece that was sold by the Milwaukee Road estate was the commuter lines to Metra, which was a contested situation over price. At the same time, the Illinois Central was in terrible financial shape. We ended up acquiring in 1987 Metra Electric, the old Illinois Central Electric, again because of financial problems at the railroad. And the Northwestern, which Jim worked for, was also in financial difficulties, but that was taken over by Union Pacific, but purchase of service contracts were entered into with Union Pacific on the 3 UP lines, North, Northwest, and West. And we also have a purchase of service agreement with the BNSF into Aurora. Of all of those railroads, the only one that was not in financial trouble was then Burlington Northern, which merged in 1995 to become Burlington Northern Santa Fe. So we have a whole series of arrangements. We own and operate 2 of the lines, Rock Island and Milwaukee, and Illinois Central. We own the Milwaukee roads, but they are dispatched by Canadian Pacific. We have purchase of service agreements with UP and BNSF. That covers 4 lines. Then we have trackage rights agreement with Canadian National on this line here through town, as well as the line to Joliet that goes through Lamont and Lockport. And we also have a lease arrangement with Norfolk Southern to operate down to Orland Park. It's our crews, our equipment on Metra Electric, Rock Island, Milwaukee Road. It's our equipment and our crews on North Central, Heritage Corridor, and Orland Park. It is Burlington Northern crews wearing Metra uniforms and UP crews wearing Metra uniforms on the trains on those lines. You think we could make this a little bit more complex? But, so that's part of the fun that Jim has running this railroad day to day.
And actually, that's going to be my next question. We know a little bit about what Norm does and all with the railroad, but Jim can maybe explain more what your role is.
Yeah, as CEO, basically I coordinate all of this on top of dealing with the legislator. So I came out of the mechanical ranks for 22 years. It seemed like a very challenging thing. You're rebuilding old cars, locomotives, and maintaining and trying to keep everything running. That becomes a side job when you have to start figuring out how do you fund this. And that's been the biggest day-to-day operation. So even events like this, it's getting our message out right now. A lot of people and a lot of legislators don't know about what Metra does. A lot of people realize in communities like this what the value of Metra is. There's tremendous examples throughout the region where communities have completely redeveloped their downtown areas right around the stations. And there's great value there. But when it comes right down to the funding in the state, and we really count on state funding, for the capital investment, this is the new challenge, and this is my day-to-day, literally looking at how are we running efficiently, how are we spending the taxpayers' dollars as efficiently as we can, responsibly as we can, yet getting our message to the legislators that the need is here. I say a lot of times that we haven't derailed yet. And what I mean by that is if you look at the East Coast, New Jersey Transit's in the newspapers quite often for financial and operational issues. Long Island Railroad's right behind them. SEPTA and Amtrak, they've had their issues over the years. And we've been kind of that squeaky, non-squeaky wheel. So we're not a crisis, and when you're not a crisis, you sometimes don't get the attention. We did have some other crises several years ago, with our executive director at one point in time and so on and so forth. That crisis was really handled at the executive director's level. The men and women that operate this system have just continually done their job to try to do the best they can to perform the services that they can with the monies that we're given. But the monies just aren't there. As Norm pointed out, when we were formed from bankrupt railroads. And when you're formed from anything bankrupt, the first thing you have to think about is we're probably not getting the best house. And that's why 400 of our bridges are over a century old. That's why we still operate out of a shop built in 1926, one of our main shops built in 1926. Our main rehab shop right now, built in 1947, was never ever designed to do what we do. We rehab 35 cars in-house in that shop every day. So what do? I tell our story. I coordinate the chaos. I have great people to operate the railroad, and I tend to spend a lot of time trying to be creative in a way that we can get the message out, and try to get some funding for the future. 3 times in our history now, Illinois has stepped up to the plate and provided us with capital programs. In those 3 times, we've replaced ancient buildings. We've rebuilt bridges and stations. We've bought rolling stock. And the last one I'll just speak about was 2009. We replaced the entire electric district fleet. That was $585 million. That's just the cost of equipment these days. It's very expensive. But what we did with that was we operated that system in such a way that the reliability runs at 98%. The new technology that's there right now, in 2017, we ran 45,000 trains over there. We had 8 mechanical failures. It's insane in the industry. And then the other hidden benefits that came with the new equipment were a 25% reduction in electrical consumption. And the things that drive the trains underneath traction motors, they go 10 years now, and we haven't even had a single failure. So on an annual basis, we normally spend $2 to $3 million a year just rebuilding those motors, one component of a diesel engine, and on that district they're 0. So once again, my goal is to tell our story in the fact that when you invest in the technology and invest in us, it's money well spent.
Was it about 8 years ago that the state legislature passed that 0.25% sales tax, 7, 8 years, something like that? And I know that gave a little bit of infusion into the system also for the RTA in general, and I'm not sure how much you guys get out of that, but hopefully get your fair share. And the capital projects, I know we're all looking towards the state to help us all with the capital project. It's been about 10 years now. We're hoping to have something done in the next couple of years. What is it that Metra's looking out of a capital project? As you said, $585 million you spent on the electric line. Was that all from the capital project, or was that including Metra funds?
That was all capital funds from the last capital program from Illinois.
Okay.
On that capital program, we were supposed to get $1.1 billion. That seems like a very large number. They ended up shorting us 200.
State of Illinois shorted you? I can't believe it.
$265 million. On top of that, the federal government gave us a mandate to put on a special braking system called positive train control. That's now costing Metra $400 million, and we had to take the limited resources that we had several years ago, shift them forward to pay that. So you take those 2 things right now, and I'm looking at $660 million, and just for just an example, $660 million can probably buy about 300 rail cars. We're running rail cars today on the Burlington line at 70 miles an hour that are 65 years old.
Wow.
Safely.
Well, they're built solidly, luckily. It's not like the old Yugo car or something that was built solid and made to maintain and handle those speeds. And I'm sure the upkeep and maintenance on a daily basis is what really has maintained those for all these years. And we all look for that longevity of our equipment. Otherwise, we could never afford anything. So that's great you guys are able to do that. Let's see. With the Round Lake area, we have 2 lines. We have the one in Round Lake Beach, and we also have the one in Round Lake. How is the ridership on those 2 lines, and is there a prospect of getting weekend service out in Round Lake Beach? Round Lake has it right now. They've had it for years. They run a lot more trains than we do here. It's a much newer line, and I know Norm and I talked a little bit about this earlier, and but maybe for the rest of the audience, they can understand the difference between the 2 on ridership and what the future might hold.
Well, this line was here in town was built at the request of the mayors along the way, and that they felt that the service was needed. So in preparation for this evening, we went back to the original forecasts and compared the ridership up until today and the advance of the forecasts. And unfortunately, at best, this line is having ridership equal to 50% of the forecast, only about half of what was expected up until this point. The ridership over on the Milwaukee district is roughly almost 4 times the ridership on this line. To give you some idea, the 4 stations that are from here north, I should say from Grays Lake north, are 468 people a day ride back and forth. That's 17% of the ridership on the entire line. The largest station on the line is Buffalo Grove with 500 passengers. The system average is 625 passengers per station, and as I was pointing out, that ranges from 6,000 passengers at the Route 59 station on the border of Naperville and Aurora to 15 passengers on one of the stations on the Metra Electric. Looking at the Fox Lake line, about 1,100 passengers originate from between Grays Lake and Fox Lake. If you count them down and back, that's 2,200 rides or 1,100 people. Northbrook and Glenview each board 1,000 passengers on that line. Our average ridership is 22 and a half miles, and it tends to drop off significantly once you get beyond 22 and a half miles. The exception is the line to Aurora. We are blessed with 3 tracks, which provides the opportunity for express service, and we are blessed with a lot of people that are oriented toward working downtown. With regard to the Saturday service, I have said many times that I do not see any Saturday service on this line in the foreseeable future. There just is not the demand for that service, particularly on a weekend. We have tried the service on the Southwest line, and in Jim's words, we don't earn enough revenue on that to pay for the brake shoes, much less the fuel and labor that it takes to run those trains on Saturday. Weekend service represents an opportunity for us. We're trying to figure out how to make that work. What we believe our opportunity is faster transit time, in other words, more express trains, which is difficult when you only have 2 tracks, or in this case, not even 2 tracks in some places, and reverse commuter. The other thing, which is a matter of frustration to me, is that John Lobato and I, from the village manager down in Mundelein, had a chat, I think it's even 2 years ago, about what can we do with this line. And I went to him and I said, John, we have to figure something out. This is just doesn't work long term. So as a result of that, he went to work, and it's now been 2 years, and the RTA has yet to release the contract to hire a consulting firm to look at the study. And then they'd say it may take up to 2 years. Well, my point of view is we need the information now. We need the data right now. So one thing I would urge is Rich, that you and your fellow mayors and managers along here kind of say to RTA, we need to get rolling on this. Light a fire, because this is really a serious question. And at the risk of saying something that I may have to explain in detail, the increased ridership or increased revenue has a much greater leverage factor than attempting to take something away, because the fixed costs in running a railroad are extremely high. And my comment is, and this is just a number off the top of my head, but once we publish a schedule, 97 to 98% of our costs are fixed. The only thing that's going to vary is cost of fuel, impacts of weather, and cost of claims and insurance. Those are the only 3 factors that would really move that needle. We particularly have all kinds of capacity during the midday and, or in the evenings, so there's an opportunity, but getting people out of their automobiles is tough these days. And the interesting thing is Jim and I were out in New York meeting with Metro North, which is this is the line that goes north out of Grand Central Station into New York and also into Connecticut up to New Haven. They were fortunate enough to have the resources to add trains, and they said their ridership changed significantly simply with the frequency of service. They also have a situation where they have enough trackage that they can run locals halfway up the line and then have the trains coming out of Grand Central run express to that halfway point and then do the local work beyond. So they really have reduced the transit time for the people that are beyond the halfway points on these respective lines.
Nice. We were talking earlier also a little bit about some of the communities along the railroads and how they've transformed their downtowns based on where the railroad sits. Can you maybe explain a little bit more about how Metro's efforts can translate in dollars in economic development for communities such as Round Lake Beach?
Well, I'll take that. You know, each town's different. It's amazing when you see some of the towns and some of the vision that they have, and you can watch it over 10 years. And it's hard to say that everybody's going to have that same success story. I'll give you an example in Boston, which is obviously it's a different town. They did immense studies, and they've concluded that for every $1 they put into the transit system, they'll get a $4 return on investment within the economic growth of the region. They you say $1 billion and $4 billion, but that is an example that's cited throughout basically the country when you talk about investing in an area and the economic growth that can and should come about from it. I mean, the great thing about this region is there's plenty of other villages to go to and say, how did you do it? And how did it grow? Our job is, of course, to partner with the villages and partner with the communities to make sure that we're providing something that's a resource to them. Reliable is the first thing. People want to know when the train's going to be there and when it's going to be where they want to go. Yes. And non-obstructive into the region as well. You know, so unfortunately, when you're running a lot of freight trains in some areas, things can happen and that can be obstructive. But that's the nature of having the Chicago region, 1,300 trains in this region. It's just, when you say the numbers, it's actually unfathomable to think. Every other part of the country looks at us as like, how do you do it? Because when they think that they have problems because they have 10 freight trains running on their commuter rail system, they think they have a big challenge. But it's really hard to pinpoint and just say that there's a formula. But the fact of the matter is, when it works, it really, really works well. And we see it all over the place. I know Orland's starting something up right now. Cary's working on something right now. Park Ridge, my deputy executive director of operations, has lived in Park Ridge for about 20 years. He said 15 years ago you'd walk around and it was an okay town. You walk around Park Ridge right now, around that station, it is completely redeveloped. So I'm excited when towns want to do TODs, not necessarily even just TODs, but actually try to just redevelop that as an engine. We were down at Chicago yesterday, CMAP. They celebrated Go to 2050 plan. They showed a picture of 1987 of the Roundhouse in Aurora. If anybody's ever been there, it's beautiful. They showed a picture of it with no roof on it and garbage just piled up, ready for a wrecking ball. And it took vision to take that roundhouse and turn it into what it is today. And Aurora is really using that as an area just to completely redevelop their downtown.
There's a couple communities I've noticed. Arlington Heights is one. The railroad station's right there downtown. They've built a lot around it. Cary is another one right near downtown, and as you said, they're working on plans to really use that as a focal point. Fortunately, ours is kind of a little removed from our downtown. You have to be off the side streets to get to it, but we'll keep on working to see what we can do here to integrate that more into our fiscal plans.
Rich, if I may, Orland Park, believe it or not, in their TOD has or is about to get a clinic from the University of Chicago that is virtually a hospital.
Wow.
And while it's a long way from here, I encourage people to go down to 143rd Street on Route 45, which is Manheim Road or LaGrange Road down there.
Can I get there on Metra?
They're on Metra. You can take the train down there.
A couple of trains, a little bit of walking.
A little bit of walking, but I mean, it's amazing what some of these TODs have accomplished, and my opinion is that it's only limited to your imagination.
I know when the station first went in, we talked about transportation-oriented development and what maybe we could do in that area. It's kind of landlocked, unfortunately. There's not something right by it that's free land that can be built on. I wish it was more right close by. We built our municipal campus with the culture center, which we're in today. We have our village hall, police station, post office, park district, all along the strait here. But who knows, in the future, anything's possible. We talked a little bit about the rail lines itself. You said most of it's double tracked. I know the one section through Round Lake Beach is not double tracked. Is there anything in the plans for the future to make the double tracks all the way through?
Not that I'm aware of.
I haven't heard of anything.
No.
Thought you guys would be the one that would know.
No, and of course Canadian National would have to participate in that.
Yes.
One of the challenges up in your neck of the woods here is the beautiful lakes you have, and the environmental stuff around it. You can't just lay rail everywhere. And our Fox Lake line, if you asked an operations guy what would they dream of, they'd say double track all the way to Fox Lake.
Yeah.
But that's a big lift.
Yes, certainly is. I was going to ask that next. Are there any current or future Metra initiatives to expand service besides what we've already discussed?
Well, there's one that's impacting Lake County. I have said publicly that what if their best intention that the legislature does not have the money to fund our needs, which has led me to think about, and Jim, to think about the private sector. AbbVie came to us and said, we would like to get more reverse commuter train service because they want to hire 750 people a year for the next 5 years.
Wow.
And many of the people that they want to hire are young people who recently graduated from college who have skills in the STEM area, science, technology, engineering, math. And they want to live in Chicago. So we started meetings in April, and 2 days ago, the board approved an agreement between Lake County Partners, Lake County, and the city of Lake Forest, where we are going to start a two-year pilot project in January, where we will have a train that will leave downtown Chicago, Union Station, at 5:35 in the morning, make the stops in Chicago, then run nonstop to Lake Cook Road, Deerfield, and Lake Forest. This is to get people to their desk before 7 o'clock, which is 8 o'clock Eastern time. We then will have an express train leaving Lake Forest at 5:30, making the 3 stops, and then running nonstop to Chicago, to the Edgebrook Station at Devon Avenue, for those of you that ride the line. This also gives us the opportunity to put a train in the middle of the morning rush hour, bringing that equipment back downtown to relieve some of the overcrowding south of Lake Forest. It also provides for a 3:20 train coming north of Lake Forest, which will be a semi-express train, as we're seeing demand for people that want to get downtown earlier and come home earlier. Well, the beauty of this is we're splitting this 50-50 between Metra and the consortium that I mentioned that is being assembled by Lake County Partners. This serves the reverse commuting market, which we think is a very strong market to work with. We did the same thing on the UP North line. We've had a 5:35 a.m. departure over there for about 10 years now. At one point, there were 600 people on that train. It has settled in more around 300 to 400 people. Our target is to attract approximately 400 new riders to the system. So that's 400 people coming north, coming south. We don't want to strip those people away from UP North, for example. We're looking for new riders. I think this is a model, this is a prototype model. Jim was advised it was a very positive feature on Channel 5 tonight on this project. We have been getting an unusual amount of nationwide publicity. But the bottom line is I think that we are going to have to look to these type of partnerships, absent funding, or even with funding, to enhance service in given areas. And I think frankly, we need that to show the legislature and even the federal funding sources that we're working in partnership, and I think that will cause them to be more favorable in giving us funding. Long answer to your question.
I was actually just reading about that this morning online. I saw a little article about that. I'm talking about, like I said, 5:30 a.m., getting up towards Lake Forest, and after a 2-year study, or maybe after 5 years, it said there might put some kind of a turnaround or something up in that area?
What we're doing is we're putting a set of crossovers in. Those are the tracks that connect the two.
Okay.
The 2 tracks. And that gives us more operating flexibility. And AbbVie and the other employers, AbbVie's taking the lead, they're the consortium leader of the employees, think that we will fill this train and that they will need additional service.
Wow.
And we are open to that. So it hopefully is going to end up in getting some faster rides downtown in the long term. But long term, looking way out, we need additional track capacity where we only have 2 tracks.
Right.
That's the only way you're going to get true express service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially with the freight trains on there, it's very difficult to navigate around them. And what else can the village do to help assist Metra in increasing, making residents more aware, perhaps, of the Metra and the services and the ease? I know you guys have some great commercials online and on TV, but what can we do as a village?
Well, I'm going to get back to, and say for a second time, get this RTA study underway.
Yes, we definitely follow up with that, yes, with our legislators, yes.
The other thing is to, publicize stuff that is applicable to you on your village website. We're asking villages to do that.
Okay.
And every once in a while, maybe remind them that we're out there and that we go downtown. But I think the big thing you can do is help us get the ridership up on this line, and that's not just here in Lake County. It's ridership on the entire line because we are a system.
Absolutely, yes. One of the great things that I know Metra worked with all the communities along this line is the quiet zone that we have in the evenings. That's been a godsend to so many people that live along that corridor. Still here today. That's been in place, 12, 13, 15 years, been quite a while now. But still here today from people that say, thank you so much for putting that in. So it used to wake them up all night long, and since that's been in, it's again been a godsend, so thank you for your help on that. Why don't we go ahead and take a few questions from the audience then? Anyone have any questions for us?
It's additional trains from Chicago to Milwaukee over the Milwaukee North line. So this would not affect this line. There is an environmental assessment going on. It has attracted a lot of attention, let me just leave it at that. And frankly, at the moment, the matter is kind of on hold because there's a question of how is it going to be funded. So I don't see much activity there unless there's a breakthrough on the funding.
I think a point of clarity too for the audience is the fact that the fare hikes are there, and we're very transparent about what we do. 6 of the last 7 years we've had fare increases, and only one of those fare increases had to do with operational needs. So the difference between operational needs and capital needs is the fuel, the electricity, the labor costs. That's operational. So we've been keeping up. The taxes that we get supported along with the fare box have been keeping up with the operation year over year. Last year, meaning 16 into the 17 budget, the state cut us, like they cut every community. We got cut on what's called public transportation funding, and we got cut on the fee for collecting taxes. So they took another 2% out of everybody, every village in the state. That's what caused us last year to have to raise fares to balance the budget. We're required by law to balance the budget. But the key is, out of those other fare increases, they were all done for capital. And they were done for capital because, once again, we haven't had a capital bill in a while. Several years ago, members of Metra went down to the legislator and says, we need a capital bill. And in that conversation, they said, you just don't come with your hands open or your basket open. You have to show how you're helping yourself. And our board said, yes, we'll do that. We'll come up with a plan, and we put a plan in place, and we said, we will ask our riders to contribute to this. The riders have a stake in it. We will look then to you, the legislator, to provide the other half of that stake. The grand plan, without getting into it, was $2.4 billion. It was going to replace rail cars, locomotives. It was going to finish the PTC project. And over this period of time, the riders did exactly what we asked them to do. And the legislator didn't. So this year, the fair holiday, as the board called it, was because the fact the legislator hasn't been coming to the table. Our plan included those fare increases to take care of bonding. One thing that's unique about Metra is we have zero debt. And that's the way we're sitting right now, structurally, because of the fact on debt service, you're paying basically almost 1.5 over the lifespan of particularly large, expensive items. And so we were going to take on debt for the first time, and we were going to take on debt to the tune of $400 million, but we were looking for that, I call it OPM, other people's money, and that was going to come from the state, and the state never showed up with the money. And part of that's because the state didn't even pass their own budgets. And when they passed budgets, they weren't equal. So we decided this year, the board did, to take a holiday on the fares, because it's not right to keep putting those fares on the passengers when we were going to go to the legislator and say, look, there's a stake in it from this region, and we're going to look at things structurally different this year. So what's interesting is within a month from now, you're going to have a new legislator in the state. 25% is not rerunning. There's going to be a brand new legislator in the state of Illinois, potentially a new governor or not. And for us in the city of Chicago, there's going to be a new mayor next year. So I'm looking at this very optimistically, that right now it's our time to tell our story to the communities, to the legislators, and eventually to the governor and to the mayor about the needs of the region. So that's, like I said, that's my goal, and that's why we're out. So you asked what other villages could do. More forums like this, bigger forums like this, mayor's conferences, anywhere we can tell our story, we've committed to be there, and that includes all the way down in Carbondale. Wow. It doesn't matter, because the benefits of this region affect the bottom part of the state as well. If we can't provide public transportation up here, the roads are going to get further congested, they're going to get further deteriorated, and what do you think is going to happen? The money's going to go into the roads, and that means you're not getting money downstate for those roads. There's only so much money. Right. We provide such a great economic investment. We provide an emissions investment. Our carbon footprint, we have trains that have 1,700 people on them. That carbon footprint alone, just from the 1,700 cars that would be on the road, it's incredible. And then, of course, we also provide mitigation of congestion. And so all of these factors, when you start letting that deteriorate, this is the message the legislator needs to understand. It's kind of that leaky roof theory. If the shingle's leaking, eventually you're going to pay for it in the long run. Right now, transit in this region is leaking pretty bad.
Kurt Dillard has said that Metra does more with less than anyone he knows in the industry. Kurt is the chairman of the RTA. Another example of what we are doing is under Jim's leadership as chief mechanical officer, we converted an inspection shop into a manufacturing facility. Think about that. And we are rehabbing our own passenger cars. And people have stepped into these cars and think it's a brand new car. Well, the shell is decades old, but the interior is completely brand new. By doing it internally, we save $400,000 a car. We do this for $1.3 million, roughly.
Well, $700,000 a car.
$700,000 a car versus $1.1 million if we went outside.
And brand new is $3 million.
Brand new is $3 million. So we have, by doing the rehab in-house, we have saved the taxpayers of Illinois $48 million at this point, and the program is continuing. We've also hired 105 people at middle-class salaries to do this work, so there's millions of dollars of payroll that are being reinvested in our economy rather than in somebody else's economy. This is one of the things that we've been doing. Switching to the operating side, the other major problem we have is that the economic model that we operate under was put together 40 years ago based on sales taxes. The macroeconomic changes in our economy are these. 40 years ago, it was a manufacturing economy. Today, it's a services economy. 40 some years ago plus, it was a retail store economy. Today, it's an online economy. Both of those have affected the amount of sales taxes that are collected, number one, and number two is the cost of providing the ADA service that PACE provides comes off the top of that sales tax revenue, and it's assessed against CTA, us, and PACE, and the impact of that assessment alone is $60 million a year and growing. Wow. So these are some of the factors that we are dealing with, and that at some point in time here, we kind of have to really look at the whole thing, but really the capital is the biggest point, and the RTA said that we probably need $12 billion in capital to achieve a state of good repair. Compare that to the fact in the 34 years of Metra, we have received only about $9 billion over that 34-year period. So these are, I'm a numbers guy, these are some of the numbers that are out there. And also, what we have done with Metra is we recognize that we are a personal service business. In a personal service business, you have to invest in infrastructure as well as people. A lot of business today want to invest either in people or in infrastructure, not both, but we have to invest in both. We have all sorts of unfunded mandates beyond positive train control in the regulatory environment that comes down from the Federal Railroad Administration and other places, hours of service types of issues, training types of issues, this type of thing. So again, the problem we have is the story is so complex, we can only scratch the surface in the 45 minutes to the hour that we have here, but hopefully we've given you the headlines of this. And what we're looking for, and I'll kind of re-emphasize what Jim is saying, we are looking for people to come together, work in partnership with us, particularly focusing on mayors and managers. And our objective is to tell our story and have others tell our story to the state legislature so that they know that we have a critical need here, because railroads consume more capital than any other business to maintain the system.
Is there anything I didn't ask tonight that you'd like to touch on?
That's a very good question. I think we've covered it. I'm going to say one more time, let's get the RTA going.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much for being here. Please join me in thanking them. Thank you. Our next Fireside Chat's going to be in January 2019. You can take a little break for the holiday season here. Get back together on January 30th at 6 p.m. right here. And then our guests will be the Community Partners for Affordable Housing. The senior staff from that organization will be here talking more about affordable housing in Lake County and how they help people define affordable housing and provide affordable housing for our residents. Gentlemen, do we have a little pin here for each of you? Appreciate you coming in tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.